Kia ora te whānau, thank you very much for tuning in here today with the Aquarium project. Here and on a lovely Saturday here in Auckland. I've not been doing too much interesting stuff today, but there's one thing I want to show you that okay, full disclosure, I did this yesterday, but I didn't have time to make a video about it, so I'm going to show you it today. So I'll just show you that, and then we'll jump into the actual video topic for today, which is something I'm hugely passionate about, and I think it'll be very interesting for you all. So I'll stop wasting your time, but just quickly, if you haven't already, make sure to like and subscribe and share. Rate the podcast on Spotify and iTunes and stuff. But yeah, otherwise, thank you very much, and let's show you what I was going to show you, eh? So I've done this, basically, is what I was going to show you. It is really hard to show you guys this without getting killed by the glare, so I'm doing my best. But what we've got is, so there's the tank, some of the tanks we normally sell. And instead of just selling them like bare in a box, kind of boring like, what we've done is I've scaped them and included, oh that's better, I can use my body to block out the glare. But I've scaped them, included heaters and filters and stuff like that. And so what we're going to be doing is selling them as a kind of full unit. So then you can kind of just grab them off the shelf and they'll be good to go in your house or whatever. I think it's something a little bit different and a little bit fun. And actually we've already had sold a fair few of them, had some great interest in them. So yeah, that's kind of something a little bit different and new that we're doing. I just thought it'd be fun, and I think it'll hopefully make the whole thing a little bit easier for you guys, especially because obviously they're not going to be watching this video, but we get a lot of people like wanting tanks for their kids and like families and that kind of thing, not so much like serious fish hobbyists. So having these, hopefully they can have all the fun stuff but don't have to worry about the mahi of actually putting something together. So yeah, if you're interested in any of these tanks, feel free to let me know. But yeah, otherwise we'll get talking about the main episode topic for today. So today for the main topic, I was wanting to talk about some fish that I think have a unfair reputation of being disproportionately messy, and why those fish have that reputation, if that makes sense. So things we're talking about, for example, these guys here, the Oscars, also axolotls and goldfish have this reputation. I'll show you some of them a bit further along, but all these fish tend to have a reputation of being disproportionately messy, and like, oh, you have to be careful with an Oscar because they're super messy fish, so you need extra big filtration and like extra large, water changes and all this kind of thing. And that is true. But I think what we miss, and what gets missed a lot of the time, is that there's one very key and very obvious reason why that is the case, but we don't really talk about it. So the main reason why I think that is that most of the time, I'm not going to say all the time, but most of the time, these sorts of fish, and I mean, an axolotl is not really a fish, but these sort of things, I guess, are kept in aquariums that are quite frankly too small for them. So we've talked about it a lot before, but in the case of Oscars, you'll see people talking about a 55 to a 75 gallon aquarium, which is like a 90 centimeter tank to a 120 centimeter tank. Here's an axolotl, little fella. But yeah, a lot of the time that's kind of the size that's talked about. And then when it comes to an axolotl or a goldfish, a lot of the time people be talking about, closer to that maybe 20 gallon tank, which is like maybe a 60 centimeter aquarium, maybe around 60, 70 liters, something like that. And quite frankly, that is just, for all these fish, that is far too small. I really do think that, for the case of an Oscar, you want a 5-foot tank, which is like 150 centimeters, or what would that be? Probably around 500, 600 liters, somewhere in that kind of range. And then for a goldfish, I think for a fancy goldfish, you might be able to get away with a 40 gallon breeder, which is like 90 centimeters by 45 centimeters by 45 centimeters. But you really do want bigger. You probably want a 4-foot 75 gallon tank, realistically. And then for an axolotl, I think you really do want, close to that 100 liter range, like 100 liter to 150 liter 3-foot kind of range, to be able to get the best out of them and be able to manage their waste production. So having a fish that is really big in a small tank, like the bigger bodied bigger body mass of an Oscar, the big body mass of a fancy goldfish, the big body mass of an axolotl, is going to mean that you're going to need a lot more to keep up with it, obviously, in terms of filtration and water changes and that. I was going to say obviously, but actually I don't think it is, I don't think it's quite something that deserves the obviously title. But basically, the bigger the body of the fish, the more body mass there is, the more waste that they're going to produce. And that's in the form of them going to the toilet, in the tank, their respiration waste, all that kind of thing. So what that does, or what that means, is that obviously you're going to need a lot more filtration, a lot more water care to be able to keep up with the waste that's being produced on the scale of sort of waste per unit of body mass. And I think the reason that these Oscars and axolotls and goldfish, but there is plenty more. Bristlenoses is a good example as well. Common plecos too. I could go through all sorts of different examples of this, but the basic idea is that what happens is they're kept in too small tanks where their waste is sort of overly concentrated or disproportionately concentrated in a smaller amount of water, and then they I had this fish in, and they're just producing so much waste. I will get for example, an angelfish instead, and that's going to be producing less waste, and so then that's going to be more manageable in terms of what I have to do. But if you think about it, if you know what an angelfish looks like, an angelfish is a very sort of thin. He's not a very brave fella, but an angelfish is a very thin and kind of narrow fish, if that makes sense. So even though maybe side on their body size isn't too dissimilar, because they're so narrow and thin, they're not actually going to be producing as much waste as, for example, an Oscar is or a goldfish is, because they're both very sort of fat and wide fish, and obviously more waste. So what I really do think is it is just kind of part of a larger theme that we do talk about a fair bit on this channel. I know a lot of other people do talk about it in their videos or whatever mediums they're using to kind of communicate with everybody. But it is just a part of keeping a fish in a bigger tank, gives it more space to swim around and do its thing, but also more water volume to dilute the waste. And if we're adjusting these things kind of on a relative scale, when you're keeping a fish like an Oscar, you're going to need more water volume and more room. So this is also another reason why having a tall tank is good, because if you're only limited to, I've got a 75 gallon footprint's worth of space, but I can go extra height, will dilute that waste and mean that, you pack it with fancy goldfish, it's obviously going to be less concentrated waste than if it was all in a really short tank. So I think that's something to think about, and I think it's something that we don't really necessarily talk about. I'm sure people will disagree with me on that, but I do really truly believe that it is just a matter of these fish being in too smaller tanks realistically to be able to kind of cope with the waste that is being produced by them. And just by them, going to the toilet, living their normal life, it's not necessarily, they're extra messy or anything like that. They probably are. Maybe they are, maybe they're not, but not to the extent that people talk about it. People talk about it like it's unmanageable and crazy. But it definitely is something that we can keep on top of with an adequately sized aquarium. So that's my thoughts on the whole extra messy fish kind of debate or argument that you see a lot of the time if you're reading about Oscars or trying to research them, or any other fish for that matter. And yeah, I just don't think it's as big of a problem as is made out. I really do think it is just a matter of having a more adequately sized aquarium to be able to deal with them. Because naturally, if you put them in too small of a tank, the waste is going to be more concentrated. So yeah, that's basically all I had on that sense. I hope you guys did enjoy those little tanks I showed you before. But yeah, otherwise, thank you guys very much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you haven't already, please make sure to like and subscribe and all that good stuff. But yeah, otherwise, I'll catch you in the next one. Thank you very much, and I love you all. See ya!